The relationship between the United States and Cuba has been historically complex. This complexity is marked by periods of significant U.S. intervention in Cuban affairs. Historically, the two nations also shared substantial economic ties. These factors shaped the early dynamics of their bilateral relationship. The 1959 Cuban Revolution marked a pivotal moment in 20th century history. It fundamentally reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the Western Hemisphere. The revolution led to the establishment of a communist government in Cuba. This political shift created a profound ideological divergence with the United States. The US-Cuba dynamic was irrevocably altered, initiating decades of strained relations. The event had lasting implications for international relations and Cold War politics. The Bay of Pigs invasion occurred in 1961, marking a pivotal moment in US-Cuba relations. This covert operation was a US-backed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro's communist government in Cuba. The invasion, executed by Cuban exiles, ultimately failed to achieve its objectives. Its failure significantly solidified Cuba's anti-US stance on the international stage. The event deepened the existing mistrust and hostility between the United States and Cuba. This historical incident had lasting repercussions, shaping decades of diplomatic relations. The Cuban Missile Crisis occurred in 1962, marking a critical period in the Cold War. It involved a direct and dangerous confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union. The crisis was triggered by the discovery of Soviet nuclear missile bases under construction in Cuba. This event brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, escalating global tensions significantly. The crisis underscored the extreme geopolitical sensitivity of the US-Cuba relationship. It remains a pivotal moment in history, demonstrating the dangers of nuclear proliferation and superpower rivalry. In the early 1960s, the United States initiated a comprehensive economic embargo against Cuba. This policy aimed to isolate the Cuban regime from international economic engagement. The primary objective was to exert pressure for democratic change within Cuba. The embargo restricted trade and financial transactions between the two nations. The embargo, a long-standing policy, has undergone various modifications over several decades. Despite these changes, the core restrictions of the embargo largely remain in effect. This sustained policy has had a profound and lasting impact on Cuba's economic development. It has also significantly influenced Cuba's relationships with other nations on the global stage. The embargo continues to be a critical factor in shaping the country's economic and international trajectory. Current tensions between nations often stem from fundamental ideological differences. A key example is the enduring divide between the United States and Cuba. The U.S. operates under a democratic capitalist system, emphasizing individual liberties and free markets. Conversely, Cuba adheres to a communist system, prioritizing collective ownership and state control. This ideological divergence remains the primary source of ongoing geopolitical tension between them. The United States maintains specific policies regarding Cuba. These policies are frequently justified by citing human rights concerns within Cuba. A primary area of concern involves restrictions on political freedoms. Another key concern is the suppression of dissent within the country. These concerns form the basis for various U.S. actions and measures. U.S. policy aims to address these perceived human rights violations. The United States maintains a sanctions policy targeting the Cuban economy. These sanctions are designed to limit the resources available to the Cuban government. Key sectors of the Cuban economy are specifically targeted by these measures. Individuals within the Cuban government are also subject to these sanctions. The policy aims to exert pressure on the Cuban regime through economic restrictions. Cuba maintains strategic alliances with geopolitical rivals of the United States. These alliances include significant ties with nations such as Russia and China. Such relationships are a persistent source of concern for the United States. These geopolitical alignments contribute to ongoing tensions in international relations. Irregular migration from Cuba to the United States continues to be a persistent issue. This migration is often driven by prevailing economic conditions within Cuba. U.S. immigration policies also significantly influence the flow of migrants. These factors collectively contribute to ongoing tensions and challenges in the region. Unexplained health incidents, known as Havana syndrome, have impacted U.S. diplomats. These incidents involve various neurological symptoms and health complaints. The mysterious nature of these events has led to ongoing investigations. The Havana Syndrome has significantly strained diplomatic relations with Cuba. Regime change signifies the replacement of an existing government or political system. This fundamental shift can be initiated by forces originating from within the country. Alternatively, external actors or influences can also drive such political transformations. It encompasses a broad spectrum of transitions, from coups to democratic revolutions. External pressure on a nation can manifest through various forms, including economic sanctions. Diplomatic isolation is another key method of applying external pressure on a regime. These external pressures can contribute significantly to internal instability within a country. Such instability may ultimately lead to a fundamental change in the existing political regime. Regime change often involves a fundamental shift in a country's governance or political system. A critical factor enabling such change is the presence of significant internal dissent within the population. This dissent manifests as widespread dissatisfaction with the existing power structure and leadership. Organized opposition movements emerge, channeling public discontent into collective action. These movements actively challenge the legitimacy and authority of the incumbent regime. Such internal pressures are crucial, often paving the way for successful transitions and regime changes. Direct military intervention by the U.S. for regime change in Cuba is highly improbable. This improbability stems from complex geopolitical realities. International law also significantly constrains such actions. Historically, this option has been considered, but current factors preclude it. Current U.S. policy regarding Cuba officially aims to encourage a transition to democracy. This policy focuses on supporting democratic reforms within the Cuban system. However, direct regime overthrow is not explicitly stated as a goal of this policy. The approach emphasizes internal change rather than external force for political transformation. The likelihood of U.S.-orchestrated violent regime change in Cuba is currently assessed as extremely low. This assessment is primarily due to a history of past failures in similar attempts. Historical interventions have consistently demonstrated the ineffectiveness of such approaches. The contemporary geopolitical landscape also plays a significant role in this low probability. Global political dynamics and international relations disfavor external violent regime change. Regime change can occur through various pathways, each with differing probabilities and impacts. One potential, though still uncertain, path is the gradual internal evolution of a political system. This process involves incremental changes originating from within the existing governmental structure. Such internal evolution represents a more probable, yet not guaranteed, route to regime transformation. Internal pressures can catalyze significant shifts within a regime. Economic hardship often serves as a primary driver, fostering widespread discontent among the populace. Generational shifts introduce new values and expectations, challenging existing power structures. Increased access to information empowers citizens, revealing alternative governance models. These combined factors can create an environment ripe for internal demands for change. The U.S. embargo significantly restricts Cuba's access to global markets. This policy limits Cuba's ability to engage in international trade. It also hinders foreign investment into the Cuban economy. Furthermore, the embargo restricts Cuba's access to international financial systems. These restrictions collectively impede the nation's economic growth. The embargo thus poses a major challenge to Cuba's economic development. Cuba historically operated under a dual currency system, a unique economic arrangement. This system involved two distinct currencies, circulating simultaneously within the economy. One currency was primarily for state enterprises and essential goods, the other for tourism and luxury items. The dual system led to significant economic distortions and inefficiencies. It created disparities in purchasing power and access to goods for citizens. The Cuban government has recently undertaken efforts to unify these currencies, aiming to stabilize the economy. The Cuban economy operates predominantly under state control. This centralized system significantly limits the scope and growth of the private sector. State dominance restricts the development of independent businesses and entrepreneurship. Consequently, market-driven efficiencies are constrained within the economic framework. The lack of private competition can impact innovation and resource allocation. This economic model shapes the overall productivity and dynamism of the Cuban economy. Tourism is a vital sector for Cuba's economy, contributing significantly to its national income and employment. This reliance creates economic vulnerability, as the sector is highly susceptible to external shocks. Global travel disruptions, such as pandemics or economic downturns, can severely impact tourist arrivals. Additionally, specific U.S. travel restrictions further exacerbate this vulnerability, limiting a key market. The agricultural sector faces significant challenges impacting global food security. One primary issue is insufficient productivity, limiting the overall output of crops and livestock. Another major hurdle is inefficient distribution systems, hindering food delivery to consumers. These combined factors often lead to widespread food shortages in various regions. Consequently, many nations become increasingly reliant on food imports to meet domestic demand. Foreign investment restrictions impact a nation's economic landscape. Despite some liberalization, these restrictions can deter capital inflows. Significant capital is necessary for economic modernization and growth. Such policies can limit access to global funds and advanced technologies. This can hinder a country's progress towards a more developed economy. Remittances from Cubans living abroad are a vital income source for many families in Cuba. These financial flows provide essential support to the Cuban economy and its citizens. However, the continuity and volume of these remittances are often influenced by U.S. policy changes. Such policy shifts can significantly impact the economic stability of Cuban households. Cuba faces significant pressure for economic reform. This pressure originates from critical internal economic needs. Simultaneously, there is a strong desire to attract foreign capital. The nation also seeks to integrate advanced foreign technology. These factors collectively drive the push for economic change. Reforms aim to address domestic challenges and foster external partnerships. Cuba is undergoing a process of gradual economic liberalization. This shift involves the introduction of market-oriented reforms. A key aspect is the allowance for more private businesses to operate. This policy indicates a slow but deliberate move away from a centrally planned economy. These changes aim to diversify the economy and improve living standards. U.S. policy plays a significant role in influencing global economic reforms. Its impact can either encourage or discourage economic restructuring efforts in other nations. This influence depends on the specific focus and direction of the U.S. policy. Policies aimed at easing restrictions often foster an environment conducive to reform. Conversely, policies that tighten restrictions can impede or reverse economic reform initiatives. Significant rapid economic transformation in Cuba faces substantial hurdles. Such a transformation is unlikely without fundamental changes to its political model. Alternatively, a significant shift in U.S. policy towards Cuba could facilitate change. The current political structure limits the scope for swift economic reforms. Existing U.S. policies also contribute to the constrained economic environment in Cuba. Transitioning to a full market economy presents significant challenges for nations. One primary obstacle is overcoming deeply entrenched state structures. These structures often involve extensive government control over industries and resources. Another major hurdle is ideological resistance to market principles. This resistance stems from historical economic systems and political beliefs. Successfully navigating these challenges is crucial for economic liberalization. Cuba operates under a one-party political system. The Communist Party of Cuba holds ultimate authority within the nation. This structure significantly limits political pluralism. It centralizes power within a single dominant political entity. Leadership transitions in Cuba are managed within the Communist Party. This system ensures continuity in governance and policy direction. Succession dynamics are characterized by internal party processes. The Communist Party maintains control over political leadership changes. The Cuban military holds a significant position within the nation's political and economic landscape. Beyond its primary defense responsibilities, the military actively engages in various economic enterprises. These economic ventures extend its influence far beyond traditional military functions. The military's involvement in the economy contributes to its substantial political leverage. This dual role impacts the overall stability and direction of Cuban governance. Its activities are a key factor in understanding Cuba's unique political and economic structure. Independent civil society organizations, CSOs, are crucial for advocating political change. These organizations often face significant operational restrictions. Such limitations hinder their capacity to effectively influence policy and governance. Restrictions can include legal barriers, funding constraints, and surveillance. This suppression curtails public discourse and democratic participation. Ultimately, It limits the potential for meaningful political transformation within a society. Generational shifts occur when new cohorts replace older ones in leadership and the general population. These demographic changes introduce diverse perspectives and values into the political landscape. New generations often bring different priorities and demands for governance. This can lead to increased pressure for political reform and policy adjustments. Such shifts may challenge existing power structures and traditional political norms. Ultimately, generational changes can be a significant catalyst for political evolution and transformation. Internet access has expanded globally, connecting diverse populations to digital information networks. Despite government controls, the internet provides avenues for information flow. This increased access can bypass traditional media censorship and state-controlled narratives. The availability of diverse information sources can influence public opinion and awareness. Such platforms facilitate communication and coordination among individuals and groups. This can lead to potential mobilization for political change and social movements. The United States has engaged in efforts to support Cuban dissidents. These efforts aim to promote democracy within Cuba. The Cuban government frequently perceives these actions as interference. This perception highlights a point of contention in US-Cuba relations. Cuba's political trajectory is significantly shaped by its international relations. These relationships involve various nations across the globe. A key factor is the provision of economic support from other countries. Political support from international allies also plays a crucial role. Such external assistance directly influences Cuba's internal political developments. The current political structure in Cuba makes a rapid democratic transition unlikely. A comprehensive shift to a multi-party democracy is not immediately probable. The existing political system presents significant barriers to such a change. Therefore, a swift democratic transition in Cuba is not anticipated in the near future. Political change often manifests as incremental adjustments rather than radical overhauls. These changes typically involve limited reforms implemented within an existing political framework. Such reforms aim to improve specific aspects without fundamentally altering the system's structure. Another form of incremental change is increased citizen participation in governance. This can occur at various levels, particularly in local administrative bodies and decision-making. These gradual shifts contribute to political evolution, fostering stability and adaptation over time. Sustained dialogue plays a crucial role in international relations and political change. It serves as a fundamental mechanism for diplomatic engagement between nations. For instance, ongoing dialogue between the US and Cuba can influence future political shifts. Such interactions are designed to actively reduce existing tensions between countries. Furthermore, consistent dialogue is instrumental in fostering mutual trust and understanding. This process can ultimately lead to significant and positive political transformations. Economic liberalization involves opening up markets and reducing state intervention in the economy. This process often generates significant pressures for corresponding political reforms within a nation. An open economic system typically thrives on principles of transparency and rule of law. These principles inherently demand greater political freedoms and accountability from governing bodies. Businesses and individuals in a liberalized economy seek protections for property rights and contracts. Such demands can lead to calls for democratic institutions and a more open political landscape. Economic stability is a fundamental pillar for societal well-being and governmental integrity. Significant economic instability can trigger widespread social unrest among the populace. This unrest often manifests as public protests, demonstrations, and civil disobedience. Such social upheaval directly challenges the legitimacy and authority of the existing political regime. Therefore, economic stability is crucial for maintaining political order and preventing governmental crises. Political changes are often intertwined with societal transformations. Even minor political shifts can trigger significant social repercussions. These changes directly influence the structure and dynamics of society. Individual freedoms are particularly susceptible to political developments. New policies or laws can expand or restrict personal liberties. Understanding this interconnectedness is crucial for analyzing societal evolution. The broader global geopolitical landscape significantly influences U.S. foreign policy decisions. This includes the United States' approach to its relations with Cuba. U.S. interactions with other major global powers are a key factor. These relationships can shape strategic priorities and diplomatic postures. Therefore, the U.S. stance on Cuba is not isolated, but interconnected with global dynamics. External factors often dictate the flexibility and direction of U.S. policy towards the island nation. Cuba's standing in Latin America significantly influences its geopolitical position. Its relationships with regional allies can act as a buffer against external pressures. Conversely, strained regional ties may exacerbate the impact of U.S. pressure. Therefore, Latin American relations are a critical factor in Cuba's resilience to U.S. policy. U.S. sanctions are implemented as a foreign policy tool to exert pressure on target nations. However, the effectiveness of these sanctions can be significantly influenced by external factors. For instance, the impact of U.S. sanctions on Cuba is often mitigated. This mitigation occurs due to other countries' continued willingness to engage with Cuba. International organizations play a significant role in global governance and humanitarian efforts. These entities often act as neutral third parties in complex geopolitical situations. In Cuba, international organizations can mediate disputes between various stakeholders. Their involvement can facilitate dialogue and seek peaceful resolutions to conflicts. Additionally, they advocate for human rights, promoting adherence to international standards and protections. Climate change presents significant challenges for Cuba. Rising sea levels are a major concern, threatening coastal areas and infrastructure. The island also faces an increase in extreme weather events, such as hurricanes. These environmental shifts pose substantial economic and social challenges. Ultimately, climate change impacts could influence Cuba's overall stability. Global pandemics represent a significant external factor for nations worldwide. Cuba's economy is heavily reliant on its tourism sector, making it vulnerable to global disruptions. Pandemics severely restrict international travel, directly impacting tourism revenue. Such events also place immense strain on a country's healthcare system. Cuba's healthcare infrastructure faces additional pressures during widespread health crises. These combined effects create significant economic and social challenges for the nation. The United States faces a critical policy decision regarding its approach to Cuba. One primary option is to continue a strategy of isolation, limiting interactions and exchanges. This approach typically involves economic sanctions and diplomatic restrictions. Alternatively, the U.S. can pursue a strategy of increased engagement and dialogue. Engagement promotes diplomatic relations, cultural exchange, and economic cooperation. Targeted sanctions are a key tool in U.S. foreign policy, designed to exert pressure on specific actors. Unlike broad economic measures, these sanctions focus on individuals or entities within a government. The primary goal is to influence the behavior of a target regime, such as the Cuban government. This approach aims to minimize adverse impacts on the general population of the sanctioned country. By isolating key decision-makers, targeted sanctions seek to achieve policy objectives more precisely. The United States considers various policy options regarding Cuba. One such option involves providing humanitarian aid to the Cuban population. This aid aims to alleviate suffering and address immediate needs within the country. However, providing aid carries the risk of indirectly supporting the existing Cuban regime. Policymakers must weigh the humanitarian benefits against potential political implications. Diplomatic normalization represents a key policy option for international relations. It involves the restoration of full diplomatic ties, including the establishment of embassies. This process also includes easing travel restrictions between nations. The goal is to foster broader exchanges and improve bilateral relations. U.S. policy can strategically focus on bolstering civil society. This involves supporting independent groups within Cuba. The policy also extends to aiding human rights advocates. This approach aims to strengthen democratic principles and human rights. U.S. policy options include easing restrictions on remittances to certain countries. Remittances are funds sent by foreign workers to their home countries. Easing these restrictions could provide significant economic relief to families. For example, Cuban families could benefit from increased financial support. However, this policy also carries a potential drawback. Some argue it might inadvertently strengthen the existing political regime. Cuba has a long history of facing significant external pressure from various international actors. Despite these challenges, the Cuban government has consistently demonstrated remarkable resilience. This resilience is a key characteristic of its political and social system. Often, external pressure is strategically leveraged by the government. This leveraging serves to foster and strengthen internal cohesion among its population. cooperation. This approach helps maintain stability and unity in the face of adversity. Cuba's foreign policy is characterized by its active pursuit of international alliances. These alliances are strategically formed with nations willing to challenge U.S. policies. This approach aims to diversify Cuba's international support network. It serves as a key response to economic and political pressures from the United States. By fostering these relationships, Cuba strengthens its global diplomatic standing. The strategy enhances Cuba's resilience and autonomy on the world stage. The Cuban government implements strict internal control measures. These measures are designed to manage information flow within the country. Control extends to suppressing dissent among the population. The primary objective is to safeguard the existing political system. This strategy aims to prevent challenges to governmental authority. Such controls are central to maintaining political stability in Cuba. Cuba has implemented various economic adaptations to counter the effects of the embargo. A key strategy involves promoting self-employment among its citizens. This initiative aims to stimulate internal economic activity and reduce reliance on state-controlled sectors. Additionally, Cuba actively seeks new trade partners globally. Diversifying trade relationships helps circumvent restrictions imposed by the embargo. These adaptations collectively work to sustain and develop the Cuban economy under challenging conditions. The Cuban government actively engages in strategic communication to shape public perception. A primary objective is to counter narratives originating from the United States. This involves disseminating information that challenges external criticisms and policies. Propaganda is utilized as a tool to present a favorable image of the government's actions. The efforts are also aimed at consolidating popular support among its citizens. These counter-narratives reinforce national unity and ideological alignment within Cuba. Despite historical tensions, Cuba has consistently demonstrated a willingness to engage in diplomatic exchanges with the United States. This engagement occurs when specific opportunities arise for dialogue and negotiation. Such interactions are often limited in scope, reflecting the complex nature of the bilateral relationship. These diplomatic efforts aim to address mutual concerns and explore potential areas of cooperation. Cuba's approach underscores a pragmatic stance towards its relationship with the U.S. Kinetic events are defined as actions involving physical force or motion. In a military context, this term specifically refers to military actions. It also encompasses violent confrontations or engagement. These events involve the direct application of force, often resulting in conflict. Historically, the relationship between the US and Cuba has experienced periods of significant tension. These periods involve various forms of political and economic conflict. Despite high tensions, direct military conflict between the two nations has been avoided. This avoidance of kinetic events has been maintained for several decades. The current geopolitical landscape significantly influences the likelihood of kinetic events. A key factor is the concept of mutually assured destruction. MAD implies that a full-scale use of nuclear weapons by two opposing sides would result in the destruction of both. This deterrent makes direct military conflict between major powers highly unlikely. The likelihood of kinetic action is influenced by various geopolitical and economic factors. Despite limited direct trade between certain entities, other factors can mitigate conflict risks. Geographic proximity often fosters shared interests in regional stability. These shared interests can reduce the propensity for military or kinetic engagements. Thus, economic interdependence and regional stability contribute to de-escalation. Military actions by one nation against another often provoke significant global reaction. Such interventions can lead to widespread international condemnation from various countries and organizations. This condemnation reflects a collective disapproval of aggressive or unilateral military force. The prospect of international backlash serves as a powerful deterrent against potential military engagements. For instance, any U.S. military action against Cuba would likely face severe global criticism. This anticipated condemnation would act as a key factor in discouraging such military endeavors. The likelihood of a direct kinetic event between the U.S. and Cuba is currently assessed. This assessment indicates an exceedingly low probability for such an occurrence. The evaluation considers the foreseeable future, encompassing upcoming periods. A kinetic event refers to direct military engagement or armed conflict. Therefore, direct military confrontation between the nations is highly improbable. This scenario projects a continuation of existing US-Cuba tensions. Minor fluctuations in the relationship are anticipated, but no significant shifts. The political regime and economic structures in Cuba remain largely unchanged. Overall, the status quo persists without fundamental alterations to the dynamic. Cuba continues to operate under an existing embargo, limiting its international economic interactions. Diplomatic ties remain restricted, indicating a cautious approach to foreign relations. The nation is implementing gradual, incremental economic reforms to foster growth. These economic changes occur without fundamental shifts in the underlying political structure. A primary factor is the lack of political will for major policy shifts in both countries. Entrenched interests within each nation also contribute significantly to maintaining the current state. The existence of a stable regional balance further reinforces the status quo. These combined elements collectively hinder significant changes and promote continuity. This scenario outlines a deliberate process of improving relations between two entities. It focuses on the gradual easing of existing tensions. The approach involves a slow, measured increase in engagement. This strategy aims for a steady, controlled progression towards better ties. The gradual rapprochement is a long-term diplomatic effort. The easing of the embargo presents a significant opportunity for Cuba's economic landscape. Increased trade relations are anticipated to stimulate various sectors of the Cuban economy. This shift could lead to a period of moderate economic growth within the nation. Economic diversification is a key benefit. Moving beyond traditional industries, new markets and investment opportunities would emerge, fostering innovation. Ultimately, these changes aim to enhance the overall stability and prosperity of Cuba. Increased engagement can lead to certain degrees of political liberalization within a system. This may manifest as an expansion of fundamental freedoms, such as greater freedom of expression. Such changes indicate a loosening of governmental control in specific areas. However, these liberalizing effects do not automatically guarantee a complete democratic transition. The extent of political change is often limited, stopping short of full systemic transformation. An existing regime may implement adaptive strategies to ensure its continued stability. These strategies often involve granting increased economic freedoms to the populace. Additionally, social freedoms may be expanded as part of this adaptation. Such measures are taken to preempt direct challenges to the regime's authority. Several key factors could drive significant changes in international relations and economic policies. A primary driver is a shift in U.S. administration policy, indicating a new diplomatic approach. This change in U.S. policy can lead to re-evaluations of existing international agreements. Internal desires within Cuba for economic improvement also serve as a powerful catalyst for change. These internal pressures reflect a growing need for economic reforms and development. Furthermore, a more favorable international environment can facilitate these policy shifts. This scenario outlines a significant escalation of existing geopolitical tensions. It describes a situation where underlying conflicts intensify, leading to heightened instability. The escalation is projected to result in an increase in economic sanctions. These sanctions aim to exert pressure through financial and trade restrictions. Ultimately, this leads to diplomatic isolation, reducing international cooperation and engagement. Heightened geopolitical tensions significantly impact a nation's economic stability. In Cuba's case, such tensions are projected to worsen its already fragile economic situation. This deterioration is characterized by an increase in the scarcity of essential goods and services. The scarcity directly contributes to widespread hardship experienced by the Cuban population. Economic decline can manifest as reduced access to food, medicine, and other necessities. Ultimately, heightened tensions exacerbate existing vulnerabilities, leading to a more challenging environment for citizens. The Cuban government may respond to external pressures or internal events with specific political action. One potential response involves tightening internal controls over its populace. This tightening of controls is often accompanied by increased suppression of dissent. Such measures aim to maintain stability and control within the country. Ultimately, these actions can lead to a further limitation of political freedoms for citizens. External pressure can intensify a regime's determination. This often leads to a hardening of its stance. The regime may adopt a more hardline approach. This is typically directed against perceived external threats. Scenario 3 outlines potential triggers for significant geopolitical shifts. A more confrontational U.S. foreign policy is identified as a key driving factor. Provocative actions by Cuba could also initiate this scenario. Significant geopolitical shifts globally are another potential catalyst. These elements, individually or combined, could activate Scenario 3. Cuba faces significant demographic challenges due to an aging population. Immigration trends further exacerbate these demographic shifts. These factors will have long-term implications for the nation's workforce. The changes will also significantly impact Cuba's social structures. Cuba faces significant vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. This vulnerability will increasingly shape the nation's economic planning. It will also directly influence how resources are allocated across various sectors. Strategic adjustments are necessary to mitigate future climate-related challenges. Information technology continues its widespread expansion across various sectors globally. This technological proliferation introduces new challenges to established systems. Traditional modes of governance are particularly affected by these advancements. The rapid dissemination of information challenges existing communication paradigms. Even with implemented controls, the influence of IT remains significant. This trend necessitates adaptation in how societies are governed and interact. The current generation of leaders will eventually pass from the political stage. This demographic shift is an inevitable aspect of political evolution. The transition will introduce new dynamics into the existing political landscape. New leaders often bring different perspectives and policy priorities. This generational change can lead to significant shifts in governance. The long-term outlook for the nation's political future is tied to this succession. Cuba is actively pursuing deeper regional integration with Latin American and Caribbean nations. This strategy aims to foster stronger economic and political ties within the region. Such integration could present alternative development pathways for Cuba. These paths may offer diversification from traditional economic models and partners. The long-term outlook suggests potential for enhanced cooperation and mutual growth. Global power dynamics are undergoing significant shifts, influencing international relations. The rise of nations like China and Russia is a key factor in these evolving power structures. These shifts create new strategic alternatives for countries like Cuba. Cuba can leverage these alternatives to reduce its reliance on U.S. influence. An analysis of current trends suggests a high degree of stability within the Cuban political system. The likelihood of an imminent regime change in Cuba is assessed as very low. This assessment specifically refers to externally driven changes to the current government. Internal factors and their potential impact on future stability are continuously monitored. Cuba is anticipated to undergo a slow and managed process of economic evolution. This evolution is primarily driven by internal pressures within the country. Economic necessity acts as a key catalyst for these changes. The process is characterized by gradual adjustments rather than rapid shifts. This indicates a controlled approach to economic development and reform. Political changes are anticipated to occur incrementally. The primary focus will be on maintaining stability within the existing political framework. This approach prioritizes gradual modifications over rapid, sweeping overhauls. The objective is to avoid radical transformation of the current system. Such adjustments aim to ensure continuity and minimize disruption. Therefore, significant shifts are unlikely. Rather, measured evolution is expected. U.S. policy is a significant factor in shaping the pace and direction of change in Cuba. However, it is not the sole determinant of Cuba's future trajectory. Other internal and external forces also contribute to the island's evolution. Therefore, U.S. policy remains a key, but not exclusive, influence on Cuban development. The future trajectory of Cuba is primarily shaped by its internal dynamics. These dynamics encompass a complex interplay of various factors within the nation. Social pressures represent a significant component of these internal forces. These pressures arise from the populace and influence the demand for change. Leadership decisions also play a crucial role in determining the path forward. Ultimately, these combined internal elements will drive Cuba's future evolution. Direct military conflict between the US and Cuba is highly improbable. This assessment is based on a lack of strategic imperative for such an engagement. Both nations currently face no compelling strategic reasons to initiate kinetic conflict. Furthermore, significant deterrents exist, discouraging direct military action. These factors collectively contribute to the unlikelihood of a kinetic confrontation. The future trajectory of US-Cuba relations is shaped by a complex interplay of factors. Historical legacies between the two nations continue to exert significant influence. Current policies enacted by both governments are critical determinants. Broader global trends also play a crucial role in shaping their future. Current analyses provide insights into potential future trajectories based on available data. These predictions are derived from complex models and statistical interpretations. However, the future remains subject to inherent uncertainty uncertainties. Unforeseen internal events can significantly alter projected outcomes. Similarly, external events, often unpredictable, can introduce major deviations. Such events possess the potential to fundamentally reshape established predictions and trajectories.